Hey guys, this is Jericho NC. Let's look at a few Arcane Enhancements. In this video I'll be covering Interruption, Strike, Trickery, Rage, and Avenger. Arcane Enhancements are, in a nutshell, enchantments for either a helmet or a sandana. Each enhancement has 4 ranks, with each rank costing more of the same enhancement. The first rank only costs 1, but the last rank costs 4. It costs 10 enhancements total to max out in Arcane. All enhancements are dropped in the Trial of Retribution on Earth, but only one can be earned every 24 hours. This makes enhancements very valuable and costly to trade, but in some cases it's worth it. Let's start with one of the most common enhancements, Arcane Strike. Arcane Strike gives bonus melee attack speed and is triggered on hit, which means that it has a 10% chance to proc for 12 seconds, adding 20% additional melee attack speed every time you hit an enemy with anything. This includes sentinels, warframe powers, ranged attacks, or even the individual ticks in a damage over time effect like slash procs. If you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, can Arcane Strike replace my Fury or Berserker? In some cases it can, but in most cases it can't. It's best used as an additional amount of attack speed rather than replacing attack speed mods entirely. Arcane Strike is extremely reliable and will practically always be active. Should you get this Arcane? I think so. It's solid, dependable, and very common amongst the raids. Next up is Arcane Trickery. Arcane Trickery is a unique arcane in that it procs upon finisher attack. Upon activation, it causes the user to go invisible using Loki's invisibility type. Note that this arcane does not proc from just finisher damage like Trinity's Energy Vampire, and only from finisher attacks, like Ash's Bladestorm, or finishers with your melee weapon. Is it any good? Well, at max strength you have a 10% chance to go invisible for 20 seconds. It can potentially add some survivability to warframes like Excalibur with Radial Finish or Banshee with Savage Silence. But the frame that this arcane synergizes with best is Ash, as Ash's invisibility is hard to mod for retaining a powerful Bladestorm. I don't have much of an opinion on this one yet, as I haven't ranked it up much. I showed it here for demonstration purposes. Next up is Arcane Eruption. Arcane Eruption causes enemies in a radius to be knocked over with a 20% chance to proc upon picking up energy orbs. This arcane is pretty straightforward. However, at 20% chance you have a 1 in 5 chance of knocking enemies over in approximately a 28 meter radius. This might sound impressive, but in practice it is unreliable, doesn't always knock everything over, and is also based on line of sight to some degree. It might be useful for frames lacking CC like Trinity or Valkyr, but aside from that, this arcane is pretty useless. I found it fun to use, but it's not very useful. Should you get it? No. It's too situational for certain warframes with a lackluster effect. Next up is Rage. Arcane Rage has a 10% chance of proccing on non-lethal and lethal headshots for an additional 20% primary weapon damage for 16 seconds. This arcane most notably works well with shotguns, as multiple pellets can hit the head and accuracy isn't necessary. Pretty straightforward. I've noticed that Raid also tends to proc quite often from Volt's shocking speed and the Amprex. 20% damage might sound like a nice buff, but I found it excessive. It is useful if you really need that extra bit of damage, but I generally don't have much difficulty killing targets in any situation. This arcane would be most useful on lower level or lower mastery rank players who would potentially have weaker or undermodded weapons. Should you get it? Maybe, but only if you really need them deeps. Lastly, let's cover Avenger, my favorite. Avenger has a 14% chance to proc whenever you take damage, for a flat increase in 30% critical chance for 8 seconds. Warframes are taking damage a lot, so this arcane will proc very frequently, with some reliability. This arcane is particularly interesting due to its flat crit chance increase. This means it is possible to crit with 0% crit chance weapons like the Seer or the Miter. It increases the likelihood of Berserker proccing and also makes the fabled red crit soba actually possible. It brings the Nuclear's crit chance up to 31%, and with a 4 times crit multiplier, it really makes a Nuclear shine. Non-crit based weapons have more viability with this arcane, and it's a lot of fun. Should you get Arcane Avenger? I personally find it the most useful out of the 4 arcanes that I have covered here. They can change the way they use weapons to a significant margin and also affects warframe powers. Anyhow, that's all the arcanes that I have to show this time. Thanks for watching, guys.